The Jaguars, the Lions, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Seahawks are all teams I want in on in this upcoming fantasy football season. And I'm about to tell you exactly why that is. Now, the requirements when I was creating this list are 6 or more players on a certain team that I would enjoy drafting or I would like drafting in my fantasy football team for this upcoming season. Starting it off with Trevor Lawrence on the Jags here. He's currently going as quarterback number 8, which is, I think, a fair spot for him personally. I do think he offers that top 5 upside though, but the only reason that I'm hesitant to say that for sure is because he doesn't have too much running ability. I mean, the quarterbacks that are going in front of him have a lot more ability to run. Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson's going in front of him. Jalen Hurts runs the ball a lot. Patrick Mahomes even runs the ball quite a bit. So Justin Fields as well is another one. So I'd say we have to limit his potential just a bit, but I think he offers great throwing potential. You just saw what Justin Herbert did 2 years ago. He threw for over 5,000 yards. I think Lawrence could come very close to this in this upcoming season, and he increases fantasy points each year so far that he's been in the league. His rookie year, he scored 11.7 per game, and then his second year was 17.4 per game. I'm expecting him to take that jump towards the 20 point per game mark for Trevor Lawrence. That would be an amazing feat to accomplish. Also, he added an elite weapon in Calvin Ridley. If Ridley comes back like he was on the Falcons, it is game over this season. Also, you still got Christian Kirk in this offense, who had an amazing season last year. Next up, Travis Etienne. I think Etienne is a great pick this upcoming season, especially if he slips into the early 4th round. I find that to be the best value for him. If he is there in the 4th round, I would have no problem taking him at all. We are all hoping that he's going to be used more in the passing game this season, and he's expected to be more involved in this offense than ever before. Now, we saw this article here, Travis Etienne Jr. impressing with his hands. I don't know what this guy means by that, but hopefully that means he's going to be catching a lot more passes. Now, Peterson is also suggesting that he's going to get enough usage to hopefully get around 1,700 yards this season. So high praise from his head coach here. And if you're positioned in the draft where Etienne is on the board around guys like Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce, and Aaron Jones, I would take Etienne all day, every day, and I'm feeling great about it. Next up, Calvin Ridley. I know there's a steep price tag considering that he hasn't been in the league for some time now, but I'm definitely betting on Ridley having a good season here. And I would also be betting on Lawrence playing better if I'm betting on Ridley, which I am betting on both. Everything I'm seeing from training camp, various clips online, route running, catching ability is all still there, and he looks like his old self. They have the easiest wide receiver strength of schedule in the entire league, and I think it's a good spot to take Ridley right after Chris Olave goes in your draft, because Olave, I think, is going to be the best year 2 wide receiver in the entire league this season. I think he has huge breakout potential, so I wouldn't be jumping Olave to grab Ridley, but I would grab Ridley right after Olave. Christian Kirk, 1,108 yards receiving last season, going up against every team's #1 cornerback. This season, Ridley is there to take that pressure away from him. He's going to torch all the #2 cornerbacks in the league. Trust me, you want everything to do with Christian Kirk here. He's going at number 76 overall in PPR, which is absolutely criminal for a guy that just had over 1,000 receiving yards last year. Like, what are we doing here? Next up, Evan Ingram. I think it's a great price tag for Ingram, in my opinion. If he somehow slips past Pat Freiermuth and David Njoku, 100% taking this guy every day of the week. If you want to pair him and Trevor Lawrence together, that would be amazing on your team. They built a great connection that he really didn't have on the Giants. So once he got to the Jaguars, I think he's really exploding into his full potential here. Just signed a new contract for $42 million. Now, a lot of people are saying that he's going to lay off the gas, but I personally think he's going to ramp it up even more. This Jaguars team is motivated. They want to win a championship. They want to win some playoff games, and they're going to do exactly that. They're going to play to their full potential. Zay Jones, last but not least, on the Jaguars team that I wouldn't mind having. With one of the later picks in your draft, why not take the 3rd wide receiver on this team? He had a quiet little 823 receiving yards last season, even though he's not going to be used the same way as last year because of the addition of Ridley. We all know this. He's going as overall number 166 in PPR leagues. Might as well take the chance on the guy. Next team up is a pretty obvious one, Patrick Mahomes. He finished with over 5,000 passing yards last season and over 40 touchdowns for just the second time of his entire career. He's only 27 years old, so he's not even close to being at the age where that's a factor whatsoever. Now, I know the price tag is steep, but if you want a guaranteed production value out of your quarterback when he's healthy, Patrick Mahomes is 100% the guy for you. Next up, Isaiah Pacheco, 830 rushing yards last season. But what I really like about this guy is that he averaged 4.9 yards per carry, which means he's very efficient on the ground and he runs super hard. He should see a full season of playing time this year as long as he recovers from his torn labrum and hand injuries, which he is expected to do by week 1. He's definitely a better selection in a standard league, though, in my opinion. But if he falls past ADP in a PPR league, I still like this guy. Second-year breakout, hopefully for Pacheco. Andy Reid loves this guy. He's going to give him more work. If McKinnon wasn't on this team at all, I would 100% be all in on Pacheco. Next guy we are talking about is actually Jerick McKinnon. He's one of the best pass-catching running backs in the entire league. The only downside of this guy is that he doesn't see too many rushing attempts with Pacheco in this offense. Now, he's coming off his best season ever in PPR scoring and best receiving season ever as well. I think he does more of the same in this upcoming year. Next up, Sky Moore. I think this is a little bit of a riskier play, but I'm banking on that year 2 breakout. He should be the starting slot receiver in this offense. How can you not bet on Patrick Mahomes? If he makes that connection with Mahomes and they get in the same rhythm, whew. There's also been overwhelmingly positive comments coming from Chiefs camp this offseason saying that he is matured and earned the trust of Mahomes. Next up, Travis Kelce. Obviously, this one's a no-brainer. Number 1 tight end in fantasy football, it seems like every single year. This guy's in a category of his own. If you can get Kelce and Mahomes, that would put you in an amazing spot to start off your draft, but your wide receiver or running back position could suffer later on, so just keep that in mind if you decide to do the Kelce-Mahomes combo. Rashee Rice is last but not least on this Chiefs team. Putting Rice on here over Kadarius Toney simply because of his health concerns. Toney has never been too consistent about staying on the field. Rashee Rice had a 32% target share at SMU last season, which is pretty crazy. I'm not really expecting a massive first year from Rashee Rice, but I'm definitely buying into him in fantasy leagues. I think he could be a stud in the future. Next team we're going to be talking about is the Los Angeles Chargers here. Shout out Mr. I know you're watching this video. Diehard Chargers fan over there. Justin Herbert is the first one up on this list. Last year, torn labrum and a fractured rib that he played with throughout the majority of the season. Now, the year before that, he threw for over 5,000 yards. And we talked about earlier how Mahomes has only done that 2 times throughout his entire career. Herbert did it in his second year in the league. Now, the first 2 years in the league, he averaged 22.3 fantasy points per game, which is wild. He has some crazy weapons on this team: Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Quentin Johnson at wide receiver, and then he has Gerald Everett at tight end. Next player up on this list, Austin Eckler, rock solid option as your number 1 fantasy running back because of all the passes that he catches. He's led the league in touchdowns at the running back position the last 2 seasons, averaged the most PPR fantasy points of his entire career last season with 21.9 per game. He's going to be great again, guys. If you have the 4th pick, the 3rd pick, 5th pick in your draft, take Austin Eckler if he's there. Keenan Allen, next up here. Now, obviously, he's getting older, and that's a cause for concern for many people, but when he's healthy, he is clearly Herbert's go-to option. He averaged 18.7 fantasy points in his last 8 games of the season last year once he was finally healthy, and the whole time, like we mentioned, Justin Herbert wasn't healthy, so he didn't even have a fully healthy quarterback throughout that time when he produced 18.7 per game. All right, now Mike Williams is the next guy up on this list. Listen, he is a great deep threat guy and a solid best ball player, but he is very inconsistent in my opinion. Either this guy's dropping 25 points or he's dropping 5 points, and you really cannot have the inconsistency like that in ESPN leagues. All right. Fantasy experts for the longest time now have been projecting that Mike Williams, past 2 years, 2 or 3 years or so, projecting that Mike Williams is going to pass Keenan Allen in targets and take over that starting wide receiver, number 1 receiver on the Chargers position. I don't see that happening until Keenan Allen retires from the league. I'm also a little bit more concerned about Williams' targets being taken away than Keenan Allen's from Quentin Johnston. Speaking of Quentin Johnston, big 6'3" wide receiver here who is already impressing everybody at training camp. Now, he would slide right into either of these guys' roles, Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, barring any injuries from either of these guys. And they have a history of being injured, not staying healthy throughout the whole season. Probably bet on that happening again, and Quentin Johnston would thrive in that environment, just like Joshua Palmer did last season. Now, a lot of reports are saying that he's the best yards after catch receiver in his class. We'll have to wait and see for that. Last but not least, Gerald Everett on this team, the 4th easiest tight end strength of schedule going into this year. Super value play here because he's tight end number 18 in terms of ADP. So one of your last selections in the draft, unless you're in a 12-team league. And even then, he's probably one of your last tight ends taken, so might as well. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles. This one was pretty obvious that's going to be on this list. Jalen Hurts is number 1. Really excited about Jalen Hurts being good for a long time to come. He has that straight-up winner's mentality. I watched that quarterback documentary, and I heard he declined it at least 2 times because he just doesn't have any interest. He just wants to win a damn Super Bowl. He just wants to make the playoffs and win the damn Super Bowl, win a ton of games. That's exactly what you want from your franchise quarterback. Now, he's got a steep price tag here. I will admit it. He's going in the late 2nd to 3rd, early 3rd round, but I think if you want to take him, he's 100% worth it. He has great weapons around him. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and now adds DeAndre Swift to the mix, who we are talking about next. Swift is currently going as running back number 24, but honestly, I would rather have him over guys like J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders even. I know that's a little bit of a stretch. Dameon Pierce, but he's got the number 1 offensive line in the NFL to run behind now. Great pass catching back who is going to have a bounce back year, in my opinion. Next up, another running back, Rashad Penny. Now, the Eagles have shown in the past that they can roster 2 or 3 fantasy relevant running backs. If Swift sticks mainly to his pass catching role, like I think he will, and then he'll get about, 7, 8, 10 rushes a game maybe, then Penny can handle that workload on the ground and end the game with 20 or more carries, let's just say. We saw exactly what Miles Sanders did last season, and that was still with getting Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott involved a lot in the offense. Now, Penny has been an extremely efficient runner throughout his career when he's been healthy, averaging over 5 yards per carry, which is absolutely wild. Next up, A.J. Brown. Great option to have on your NFL team. I'm not 100% sure I would take him, especially in the 1st round in fantasy when Devonta Smith doesn't go too far later. I think they're going to have much closer statistics this season in terms of catches and touchdowns and in that regard. But now, obviously, Brown is much bigger, much bulkier than Devonta Smith, and he's a great down-the-field threat for Jalen Hurts. Next up, Devonta Smith really started exploding last season when Goedert was hurt. I would expect slightly less points than the end of last season just because of that fact that Goedert is back, but he gives you more. Do not be surprised. Now, better value than Brown, in my opinion, with similar talent, just like I was talking about, but if you get either of these guys on your team, I don't really mind it. Dallas Goedert, last but not least, on the Eagles, always a solid option when he's healthy. I mean, he's going right around Darren Waller and Evan Ingram, which I think is a pretty fair spot. He should end up giving you around 700 to 800 yards and about 10 fantasy points per game in PPR, which you're going to take that all day, every day of the week. Next team up here, we have the Detroit Lions. Now, Jared Goff is the first one I wouldn't mind having. This is going to be a super late quarterback pick. He's going as quarterback number 18. But listen, he played pretty well last year. His 3rd year in Detroit might be his best year yet in this upcoming season, especially with the addition of Jahmyr Gibbs. And when Williams comes back from suspension, he's going to have another option there. I know Williams just got hurt in the preseason, which absolutely sucks. This guy cannot not catch a break here. I mean, he did do it to himself with the gambling, but getting hurt right there doesn't help at all. 16.7 fantasy points per game from Jared Goff last season. Definitely not terrible, but he's better than Russell Wilson last year, so we'll have to keep an eye on that and see. Definitely has better options at the receiving core than Russell Wilson, I will say as well. Next guy up, Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, obviously, Gibbs is expected to dominate, and they are clearly super high on this guy because they drafted him in the first round of this 2023 NFL draft. He's being compared to a potentially more explosive Alvin Kamara. He's running behind the number 2 offensive line in the league for blocking, so I'll take that all day. Which brings us to our next player here, David Montgomery. I think he's going to get a lot of rushing attempts, and the Lions have already been trying out a ton of 2 running back formations. Along with lining Gibbs up at wide receiver, they'll have Monty in the backfield at running back. He's going to get the majority of the goal line touches now that Jamal Williams isn't there anymore. Just 2 years ago on the Bears, he averaged 17 fantasy points per game, but they absolutely sucked last year, so you didn't see any of that. The potential is crazy for Montgomery on a better team. I mean, he's clearly upgrading his team and hopefully upgrading his potential as well. Next guy up here, who is probably the most obvious option on this Lions team for fantasy viability, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Absolutely love this guy. I saw somewhere on social media that he reads all the receivers drafted ahead of him for motivation every single day. That's how you know this man means business and he wants to dominate. He wants to be better than all of those players. Now, dynasty leagues, you better get your hands on this guy. You better have him for the future because you're going to win some trophies if you got this guy. He has potential to finish as a top 5 wide receiver in my opinion, and he's also going to be a great 1-2 punch with Jameson Williams once he is back. Now, Jameson Williams is next up here. He's the best receiver in this class, but we haven't seen too much from this guy, obviously. St. Brown is going to take away the number 1 cornerback, so it should leave him some deep touchdown opportunities for sure once he's back. I would draft him in one of the last rounds in your redraft leagues, especially in best ball. He's going to go a little bit early, so I think his price tag is a little bit steep there, especially because he also just hurt himself, but he's got those 6 weeks to recover. He's going as wide receiver number 48 on Sleeper, and in redraft leagues, he's probably going way later than that, so maybe not the worst option to take him in your ESPN or Yahoo leagues. Who knows? Sam Laporta last on this list. He should be the starting tight end right away for the Lions. Haven't had that solid tight end since Hawkinson left this team. He's going as tight end number 17 this season, so why not take a shot on Sam Laporta? Last team we got here, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Geno Smith is first up. He shocked absolutely everybody last season with his 4,000 plus passing yards for the first time in his career. Great receiving core to throw to this season with DK, Lockett, and the newly added JSN. QB number 15 this season in average draft position, so that's going to be a great value, and it means that people are still sleeping on Geno this season. Next up, Kenneth Walker. The best time to grab Kenneth Walker, sad to say it, is already past because he was hurt and nobody knew if he was going to come back and play on time, but he seems good to go. He broke 1,000 yards rushing in his first season and averaged 13.4 PPR fantasy points per game. Hopefully, for his sake, Charbonnet doesn't eat too much into his workload. Now, on the contrary, Zach Charbonnet owners want that exact thing to happen. Owners want him to eat into K9's work. There's a lot of risk baked in here, but I would take him over a guy like Jamal Williams, who is going ahead of him any day of the week, because there's that potential that they use both of these running backs, or if K9 gets injured at any point in the year, Charbonnet would slide right into that role. Now, DK is the next guy we're talking about here. I'm going to be honest with you. He's not my favorite option because he's going normally in the 3rd round, but if he ends up falling to the 4th round, I can't see any reason why you wouldn't take this guy. He's still super young at 25 years old. And maybe Njigba takes some pressure off of him this season. Certainly hoping for a bounce back year here after declining for the last 2 seasons in a row for DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett. Last season, he was very undervalued, but this season, he's being placed just right, in my opinion, at wide receiver number 28, just around Brandon Ayuk and Christian Kirk. Personally, I'd rather have Christian Kirk and maybe Brandon Ayuk over Lockett, but if you end up with Lockett on your team, I'm not crying about it. I'm not crying myself to sleep about that at all. I think JSN also might eat into Lockett's role a bit towards the end of this season, and that's actually who we're talking about next here. Jackson Smith-Njigba looking to make a huge splash in the league and is already impressing in training camp. If either DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett were to miss any time, he's going to be an every week starter in fantasy, trust me. And he probably has the most potential to break out in year number 1 out of any wide receiver in the league here. Now, I do have to say some honorable mentions on this list. I wrote down the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Vikings, Kirk Cousins, Alexander Madison, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson. And then for the Steelers, Kenny Pickett, I wouldn't really mind this year because it's year 2. Hopefully he breaks out. Najee Harris performed pretty well last season. I think Deontay Johnson has to have a bounce back year. I think George Pickens is going to have a bounce back year in his 2nd season. And then I think Pat Freiermuth is going to perform just fine on that offense. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to drop a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let me know if you guys got any of these players on this list on your teams. And if you do, you should be set up for success here. Anyways, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.